Lavrov stresses that positive signs for dialogue in Syria are available, renewing Russia's rejection of any preconditions for dialogue. Our army units hunt down dozens of terrorists and confiscate their weapons. Civil disobedience continues in the city of Port Said as protests call for ending the rule of Muslim Brotherhood. Good afternoon and welcome to our news for today. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has affirmed that the use of force will not solve the crisis in Syria, as there is increasing awareness of the need to get it solved through dialogue. At the conclusion of the Russian Arab Forum in Moscow, Lavrov said, "The Arab League's suspension of relations with Syria is incorrect," underlining the need of starting dialogue between the government and the opposition. He added that Russia would support such dialogue and help create the relevant appropriate circumstances on the basis of the Geneva Statement. Lavrov called for an international conference to render the Middle East an area void of nuclear arms, pointing out that Moscow is dissatisfied with the course of events, particularly in light of the appearance of armed conflicts in the region and the rise of extremism, terrorism and unsupervised armament. For his part, Lebanese Foreign Minister Adnan Mansour stressed that there is no other alternative in Syria except solving the crisis through dialogue. He warned against the danger of sending foreign terrorists into Syria. Mansour expressed support for the Russian initiative, which calls for rendering the Middle East an area void of weapons of mass destruction. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Ramin Mahmoudparest has emphasized that solving the crisis in Syria can only be achieved through dialogue and negotiations between the government and the opposition. However, he added, some regional and foreign states have insisted on interfering in Syria's affairs and encouraging the armed groups to carry out terrorist operations preliminary to foreign military intervention in Syria. In a TV interview with Russia Today satellite channel, Mahmoudparest said military foreign intervention in Syria will leave a large number of victims among innocent civilians and will totally destroy the country's infrastructure. Former Australian Foreign Minister Gareth Evans has said that sending arms to the Syrian opposition will not bring about peace to Syria. In an interview with the Czech Respect magazine, Evans pointed out the Syrian opposition includes undemocratic trends, warning against the growing radicalism of some of its groups. The former Australian Foreign Minister said, "The best solution for American and European politicians is to refrain from obstructing political negotiations." He added that foreign military intervention in Syria may render the situation worse. Two mortar shells fired by terrorists have fallen into Shireen Sports City in Al-Baramke neighborhood in Damascus. One player of Al-Wathba team was martyred and several players were injured during training. Our army units have continued to pursue terrorist groups in the four farms of Douma, Harasta, Rihan and Kafar Batna in eastern Ghouta, killing and injuring several terrorists and destroying their hideouts, which included automatic rifles, machine guns and large quantities of ammunition. Our army units have targeted in series of operations terrorist gatherings in several areas in Idlib suburbs. The operations were carried out in Al-Shaghr, Al-Bshiriyeh and Al-Janudiyeh crossing in Jisr Al-Shughur suburbs, as well as in Ditta and Ma'arrit Masreen, Al-Nayrab and Abu Zuhur. Several terrorists were killed and their weapons were destroyed. Many inhabitants of Al-Latamne and Sejar villages and Mharde town have streamed to Mharde Western Square in the governorate of Hama to express support for the Syrian Arab Army's efforts in confronting the terrorists and to voice their denunciation of the acts of sabotage and vandalism perpetrated by the armed terrorist groups against public institutions. In Homs suburbs, an army unit has thwarted an attempt by two terrorist groups to infiltrate into the country from Lebanese territories through Halat and Ayun al-Shara positions in Kalkalakh suburbs. Several terrorists were killed and wounded as others fled into Lebanese lands. In Homs countryside, competent authorities broke into a hideout used by terrorists in Jobar fields in the city's suburb and confiscated large quantities of weapons and ammunition. An army unit also repelled terrorists' attempt to smuggle weapons and medical equipment into Al-Qusayr countryside across the Lebanese borders. Israeli occupation authorities refused to set free prisoner Samer al-Aisawi, who was on hunger strike for more than 200 days. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon expressed deep concern over the quick deterioration of the health situation of some Palestinian prisoners, especially al-Aisawis, calling for conducting a quick trial to the prisoners or setting them free. As civil disobedience continues in the Egyptian city of Port Said for the fourth consecutive day, similar moves spread to other cities and towns as Al-Ismailiyah witnessed today major strikes by government employees and other political factions and parties. Workers at the Suez Canal also joined the protests against the rule of Muslim Brotherhood, which is bringing Egypt into the brink of financial collapse. Meanwhile, the opposition National Salvation Front rejected any dialogue with President Morsi and decided to boycott the upcoming parliamentary elections unless it gets guarantees of fairness and transparency. The Popular Current joined the Salvation Front, announcing that it will not take part in the elections. Back to our local news, the People's Assembly held the second session of the third regular course of the first legislative term headed by Assembly Speaker Muhammad Jihad al-Laham. Members of the Assembly asserted that the Cabinet should work to meet the aspirations of the Syrian people in developing and protecting the country. They pointed out the importance of the political program to solve the crisis in Syria as it enhances the firm principles and the independent national decision. Members of the Assembly also called on all concerned parties to exert efforts and to work in full capacity in order to provide the citizens' daily needs. The Assembly referred a number of draft laws to the specialized committees. Speaker of the People's Assembly Muhammad Jihad al-Laham reviewed with an Iraqi media delegation the latest situation in Syria. Mr. al-Laham pointed out to the bulk of conspiracy against Syria, which aims to weaken its resisting role and to undermine its national stances in the region. Assembly Speaker referred to the unprecedented media provocation which is launched by certain misleading TV channels in order to aggravate the crisis in Syria. For their part, Iraqi journalists asserted their stances in support of the Syrian people, begging them to face the savage war that target their resisting stances. With this, we end our news for today. Thank you for watching. For more news about Syria and the region and to view this bulletin again, you can always visit our website in English, syriaonline.sy. Now to latest business and market news with Khalid Saqabani after a short break.